All right, real estate agents, this is a show you want to watch if you are at all interested in luxury real estate. Sarah Keith made a decision from day one that was going to be her market. And here she is many years later, still thriving in it. We're going to hear her story. So stay tuned and stay close to the speaker. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you.
Yeah, fantastic to see you. You have done such a great job of defining the market you want to be in and making it happen right from the beginning. Give us a little background. Why don't you tell people where you are and how long you've been in real estate?
Yeah, I am based in Cape Cod, and Cape Cod's a pretty big area. So I'm focused on what we call the Lower Cape, which is Chatham, Harwich, Orleans, Brewster, and I go a little bit to the outskirts of those towns. I started in real estate in 2018. I had an entrepreneurial and e-commerce background before that. So I was comfortable with seeing how things present online, with the importance of photography, with the importance of descriptions. And I translated that into my experience with real estate. I started.
Yeah, I mean, there was a decision right from the beginning, correct?
Yeah, Cape Cod itself has an extraordinary number of second homes. We're one of the larger areas in the country with second home ownership, and we're definitely a resort community. Obviously, we have year-round residents as well, but in the luxury market here, we see a lot of second home buyers and sellers. And in Chatham especially, it's an affluent town. And basically, when I started, I knew that I was comfortable. I love architecture. I love design. I felt comfortable working in luxury. And I was lucky enough to have some really talented agents who took me under their wing and really taught me the ropes of what it takes to prepare a house and market a house, and also work with buyers in this segment.
Let's split that in two. Let's talk about working with the buyers. When you were starting out, what was it that, or sellers, either way, because what is it that is distinct and different about working with more affluent clients?
Well, I think just in general, if people are looking for a second home, they have very different motivations than they do when they're looking for a primary home. And that's regardless of the price point. So for instance, if I'm working with a buyer or even a seller, they typically aren't here. They don't live here. They have to make a special trip to visit a property. If they're in higher price ranges, they're fairly sophisticated in general, and they expect a lot of local knowledge. They expect concierge-level service, good guidance. And so that can differentiate it in terms of just their level of expectation of the service they're going to receive. In addition, it's a completely discretionary purchase. They don't have to buy. They can take their time to really get the lay of the land. There's no deadline. So, it can be a long buying cycle in terms of educating clients on different areas, different towns, different pluses and minuses for various properties.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest differences I found, because I also was in that market, and that's how we met. And coming down now into urban area, Raleigh, where housing is necessary, the demand is very different, and the cycles are way shorter because they have to be in a home so they can go to work, or they can put their kids in the schools they want them in. So the demand is very, very different. What is it that allows you to stay top of mind and keep these long-term buyers focused and moving forward?
It really comes down to personal relationships. I tend to talk to people on the phone a lot. And, I hear about agents in other markets who have, dialers, and they're just, calling tons of people every day. It's so different in this market. I think the first buyers I met were when I was doing open houses, and, you'd follow up a couple days later. And basically that follow-up would be by phone, if at all possible. And so we would start getting a relationship together. And then, I just realized I like to learn. I like to know about properties. I like to figure out how I can add value. If they gave me feedback, I would just kind of run with that and get back to them and just try to always have something valuable to add when I spoke with them. And then lo and behold, they would call me back, at
Right.
certain points and say, "Hey, I just saw this house," or "What do you think about this?" And so we would just develop, that kind of a relationship. And so it's so different from some of the other markets that I hear about, where it's far more transactional and far less personal.
Yes, it goes both ways in this market, where sometimes often they are personal. And that's mostly on how you meet the people through others. The transactions tend to be faster. We have what we're used to up on the Cape. We're used to 6 to 8 week closings. They're doing 2 to 4 here
Right.
from agreement to close. 4 weeks is like the normal, and they can sometimes have to go faster, which is outstanding for the agent and stressful all at the same time. So when you're dealing with the clients, is there a nuance that you have to be cognizant of in the way you're dealing with and how I think a lot of agents have a feeling that these people are different and they think differently and they're not so human. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I feel like I've been so lucky. I have the best clients. So I just feel like, we're interacting to try to help them buy or sell a home. And so I try to keep most of the topics in that realm and find a way to add value and really listen to them and hear what they want. Certainly, my philosophy is never pressure people, just come from a place of service and things always tend to work out. But basically, I think giving people a wide swath when they're buying or selling a home is really important in terms of not letting little things get to you. It can bring up a lot of triggers when people are trying to figure out what to do
Right.
in a situation, and it can be a loaded situation. And so I always just try to be very calm, create a nice, space and a place where they feel comfortable with me and they know I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to get offended if they have, an adverse reaction to something. Just try to keep it very mellow and calm.
Very good. In your words, in your viewpoint, why do clients come back? What is the service that you're providing that says, "Wow, we got to use Sarah," or "I want to refer Sarah"?
I'm highly available. So if a client calls me, I'm going to answer as best I can when they call, or if not, I'm going to call them right back. And we develop a longer term relationship when you're working with somebody for many months or in many cases years, even to purchase their first property. You do develop a relationship. I think that they feel that they can trust me, that I do come from a place of service. If they don't want to buy, that's fine. I'm happy to show them places and I'm enthusiastic about the Cape. I love the Cape. So I'm just happy to have people interested in moving here and, offering what I know. So I think there's just that general piece, but I also know the market really well. I'm straightforward with people. If I know the answer, I'll let them know it. If I don't, I'll find it. And, I just try to be reliable and just provide excellent responsive service.
Fantastic. So let's put this in perspective to the viewers. Every market has a luxury market. Describe the price point of your luxury market on the Cape.
Well, the Cape, right now we don't have a lot of houses that are even under $1 million in the market that I serve. And so I think, we see houses, we're not at Hampton's prices, but we do see houses in the 10 to $15 million range that do show up, many over 5. I laugh because my first couple of transactions here, I never dealt with a mortgage. We have a lot of cash buyers here. I didn't even know when I had the first property where I was working with a buyer with a mortgage, I had no idea what I was doing. It's like, oh my God, what? I have to get an appraisal and I have to, worry about the bank, timeline and all of that. So it's a different market in that realm. And certainly in the luxury market, any deal is going to be a combination of price and terms. But in the luxury market, that can really get complicated. We want to make, sometimes, you can be a couple $1 million apart, but the terms can actually make the difference in terms of, obviously cash, but other things as well. So it just, that kind of differentiates it here. So and there's also a lot of knowledge that has to go into it in any house on the Cape. But in the luxury market, a lot of times we're dealing with private docks. And there's a lot of, specific knowledge you need to know about that, and with moorings and with erosion and conservation and setbacks. And what can people do? Can they add a bedroom? Can they expand the footprint? We have a lot of regulations here that both buyers and sellers need to be aware of.
Yeah, the nature of the being close to the water definitely puts some increased scrutiny on what people can do on their properties if they're abutting any wetlands or the ocean.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sellers. How are you attracting your
So,
clients?
yeah. So I should say during COVID and post-COVID, buyers were a huge part of my kind of portfolio, for lack of a better word. Now I probably 80% represent sellers. Buyers, I have kept in touch with. I did a lot of open houses when I first started, and believe it or not, given the cycle here, I'm still in touch with buyers from that. I've also had buyers become sellers after a couple years. There's that whole aspect. For sellers, it's typically, I work with a bunch of different professionals in different areas here, from attorneys to financial planners, and I'll get references that way. And then also from previous clients who recommend me to, their friends.
And I'm glad you reminded me about your strength on the listing side. What makes your service stand out from the seller's point of view?
So the first thing for me, and I think this goes into the fact that I do love design, love architecture, and I have that e-commerce background of knowing how things look online. For me, I will jump through major hoops to get a house looking its best prior to putting it on the market. So that includes sometimes making sensitive recommendations, in terms of, hey, I love this wall color, but on Cape Cod, everything, and we laugh about it, is like blue and white,
Yep.
and those are kind of we're selling a lifestyle here, and people want that lifestyle. And even if it's not their personal taste, there's something about it that when you can kind of show that kind of nautical vibe, it really makes a difference. So a lot of house preparation. And in the luxury market, there's a certain level of expectation for what a house should look like. Also, people here who are buying, they generally don't live here. So they don't want to spend their first, year coming down every weekend and having to do renovations or paint rooms or find contractors and that kind of thing. So what we try to do is get the house as far along as possible so that somebody can feel like they can reasonably move in, even if it's dated, even if it needs some work, but at least they feel like, hey, I can move in here, and try to get a lay of the land of the house from a buyer perspective before I have to embark on anything drastic. So I'll do everything from making recommendations on paint, carpet, etc., to working with contractors, meeting them at the house, coordinating all of that for the sellers. And so that's a lot of the concierge level service I provide for sellers, especially since most sellers aren't here either.
Right. What about how they sell? Is there a marketing channel that's working more than others?
The Cape is really old school. So most of the sales that happen here come from agents on the Cape.
Okay.
So we can reach out to feeder markets. Obviously the Boston area is huge. New England, some New York, some even Philadelphia. And we also seem to have this relationship with Naples, Florida. I have no idea why,
Right.
but that's like, it should be the sister city of Cape Cod. Most of the marketing really happens locally here. Even if somebody is from Boston and they work with a Boston agent, in most cases, that Boston agent is going to coordinate with a local agent here, simply because there's so much to know here in terms of values that depends so dramatically on location and condition. Two houses in the same neighborhood could be pretty similar, but if one is closer to the water, or one has wetlands, or one was renovated and one isn't, and that's, there will have drastic value differences. And that's true of every place, but on the Cape, we don't tend to have kind of spec homes and neighborhoods where there's a bunch of comparable homes. So a lot of agents who aren't here don't feel super comfortable representing their client to buy on the Cape.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up on the pricing piece. When you're dealing with a lot of these homes, these luxury homes, there are none that are cookie cutter. They're all so unique. And there's so many different attributes that go into the home itself. How do you figure out the pricing on them?
It
It's
is so hard here.
yeah,
I mean, it is not. I think trying to dial in on pricing, it's really way more of an art than a science here. You're always having to use your market knowledge, your experience. The estimates are notoriously off.
yeah,
Yeah. And so it's really hard. You really have to slice and dice relevant properties. And sometimes they even go to adjacent towns, which I know in a lot of places, they say never do that. But here, a lot of our buyers will be looking for, they might say, hey, I'm interested in one of these three towns. And so we can kind of look if we need to go more broadly to similar properties in similar towns. But pricing a property for me takes a really long time. I take it seriously. And so, while there are a lot of formulaic, CMA tools that can kind of dial you in, I find it takes me hours to try to really feel confident on a price. And really, all you can do is come up with a defensible price meaning it's not a pie in the sky and you have relevant comps. Prepare the house as best as possible. Make sure it just shines and you're focusing on its best features. And then, do your best to put what you feel is the fair price out in the market. And this market will not necessarily tell you right away because we have longer days on market here.
That's right.
People can't get here right away. So it can be kind of nerve wracking when you first put a property on and you just don't know what's going to happen. And even after a couple of weeks, suddenly the tide can change and sometimes it'll happen fast, sometimes it will happen slow, but sometimes we see houses that have been on the market for months and then they sell for very close to full price.
Yeah. You're dealing with a thinner market, right? There's
Yep.
not as many buyers in that price point as you get higher up. You deal with buyers that aren't local, so they have to get around and get down there, and there's no urgency. So
Right.
days on market is irrelevant compared to any other market.
Yeah. But it's hard for buyers and sellers here to digest that because if they're probably from a primary market, those are huge metrics in other markets.
That's right.
So
And you could be on the same side of the street on the water at same size square foot. If one has an obstructed view, large or small obstructed view compared to a beautiful open view, that's a huge swing in price point.
absolutely. And the other interesting thing is we have so many diverse waters here. I mean, we've got the Bay, we've got Nantucket Sound, we've got the open Atlantic, then we've got, inlets and what a lot of times are called ponds, but they're actually saltwater inlets. Then we've got kettle ponds. So when people say, "Oh, I want something on the water," it
Yeah,
can
right.
mean a lot of different things. And, some people love the view of like a marina or a harbor. Other people, you could have the most beautiful house on a harbor and they say, absolutely not. I want complete privacy. I want to look out at the horizon and not see
Yeah.
anything. And so it becomes really personal and subjective.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the brokerage. I'm very much into making sure that the agent is getting what they need from their brokerage. And a lot of agents will get stuck on the brand of the brokerage. And I would love to hear your opinion on where you started, how you started, and how you chose to where you are now, and the difference the brokerage makes in staying in that luxury market.
That's a really good question. When I started, I went with William Ravis, which is an excellent company, has an excellent reputation here on the Cape. It's a family owned company. It's primarily on the East Coast. And we had an office right on Chatham Main Street. And there was a lot of foot traffic and a really great, very talented team of people there. And I feel like I got, you know, really good training with Ravis and learned a lot. When COVID hit, it changed real estate here so dramatically. And basically, I was spending way less time at the office. We were getting way less foot traffic in the office. And, people were just kind of scattered. And I ended up spending more and more time working from home and realizing that dynamic didn't change my relationship with my clients. They didn't care where I was working from because I was taking their call and responding no matter what. And we would certainly still be able to meet at the office, but we'd also meet at coffee shops or restaurants regardless. So after COVID, the market, obviously got pretty intense as it did everywhere. And then we started, equaling out a little bit. We're still nowhere near the inventory levels we had pre-COVID. But, I started thinking, hold on a minute. I really like kind of running my own show, have a background in business and in marketing. Really felt like I wanted to kind of take advantage of, a broader brokerage. And I had been familiar with EX, which really is not known here. But I had been familiar with it because I lived in Colorado for many years and it was much bigger there. And I ended up, kind of looking into it, just trying to find out more. And as I learned more, I felt like, wow, this has the platform and the tools that will work well for me because it's in all 50 states. It's very clean and efficient. It sells more homes than any other brokerage and has for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's highly efficient. And so that really resonated with me and what I wanted. In addition, I had started my brand, Cape Cod Bliss, which I felt was kind of a more memorable way to remember an agent on the Cape. It was,
Yeah.
had kind of resonated. And
You did that
I
from
was able,
the very beginning, if I remember
I
correctly.
did, yeah, yeah. So those are my, social media handle is Cape Cod Bliss. My website is Cape Cod Bliss. So, and I would advertise, with that as my website. And when I learned more about EXP, I found out that I was able to really lead with my brand to do custom signs. They would allow me a lot of leeway to try to really be an entrepreneur. And so there was some reticence because it wasn't known here. And there weren't a lot of EXP agents here, especially in this neck of the woods. But I decided that it just made a lot of sense. And they were just starting a luxury program at that point. And that had actually been one of my stumbling blocks because I had felt like their presentation wasn't quite where I wanted to be in terms of their logo and their collateral, but they were actually embarking on this new program at that point. So I joined their luxury program, which is extraordinary, and thought, "Oh gosh, are my clients gonna feel like they need a different brokerage? Are they gonna be okay with this?" And they all were. Nobody blinked an eye, and it really has not affected, my 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 relationships with my clients in any way, and I feel like I've actually been able to broaden my horizons because of it.
Absolutely. Ability to go to any firm speaks to one, your professionalism, and two, you have a brand, you have a look and feel, you have your own standards, you know what you want to present. And with any firm, agents do get hung up on the brand itself. When the reality is, and this is what I do when I'm coaching agents on where to go, it's what firm is going to allow them to grow to the level that they need. What support is there on the marketing end, on whatever it is that they need to grow. There's a home for them in that brokerage. And it very rarely, actually, it doesn't at all have to do with the brokerage name. It's all about who's in that office. It could be a big brand name that has offices all around the country, and not one of those offices is going to be the same because of the leadership within that office. So it really comes down to what kind of environment does the agent need, and are they able to go to a cloud-based firm where they're on their own with support? Yeah, obviously within the cloud, or do they need that office space? Do they want the closeness of a family type environment? It varies so much, and that is what's going to have the impact on the business, not the brand. And you've proven that very well.
That's a good point. I really think it truly is an individual decision because, like you said, some people feel very comfortable with tech and they don't need it. They can, embark on their own and feel very confident. Others need a lot of mentoring and training or, just support or that camaraderie of fellow agents. So every single brokerage model is uniquely different, but also, like you were saying, even within a particular area, one office can be highly different from another one. So like I took time to make sure that I felt really, really comfortable with EX because you really don't want to be changing brokerages that much. It's a lot. It takes your eye off of your production, and there's just a lot of decisions and a lot of learning. So, and it's easy to kind of get enticed by different brokerages for whatever they're offering. And at the end of the day, you just really have to say, what are my strengths? What am I comfortable with? And what am I not comfortable with? What do I need? And just kind of literally put it down on paper and figure it out because it really is an important decision, kind of like you mentioned, just in terms of mindset and confidence. And if you start going into a new situation and feel like a fish out of water, you're going to see that in your day-to-day professional
Everybody's going
life.
to see that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and one of the other things too, when I'm going through the assessment with agents, they look at the now, like what do they need now? And through our process, we uncover where they want to go. That is where the meat is, right? That's where they want to go with their business. What kind of level do they want to get to? And who's going to get them there? It's not just what do I need right now, and that's the fun part when we can uncover that and experienced agents, which are like the light bulb comes on. It's like, oh, okay, I never looked at it that way, and then they start to really see the opportunities, and things start to gel, and they have clarity on their next move, and it pushes them forward in the right direction, and makes that decision a lot easier when they know where they're going.
That's a good point because I think in real estate, a lot of people are just thinking, deal to deal, transaction to transaction, and there's really no exit strategy. The exit strategy seems to be, when I'm bored with it, when I'm too tired with it, or when I can't do it anymore. And I do think that this new wave of brokerages are really combining a lot of multiple income streams, a lot of ability to create revenue to a level that you want and to a level of involvement that you can decide on. And I think that is gonna be the wave of the future, and I that's one thing I love about EXP, it definitely offers that, and it's publicly traded, so even small perks like, hey, every time, you do your first deal in the year, you get stock, So there's just a lot of different avenues that I think as a realtor in this day and age, people need to be considering.
The other piece of that too is one of the things that I wasn't exposed to on Cape Cod as much as I am here, or as much as I see other agents here and in bigger markets, is opportunities to invest in properties. Being on Cape Cod and a 60-mile long peninsula, it's the price points are getting have always been high compared to other areas. So to be able to invest as an entry level, you have to go 40 miles, 60 miles, and that could be a 40-minute ride, or it can be a 2-hour ride, depending on what time of day and what time of year it is.
Exactly.
So it's very difficult to take advantage of what we know in real estate, and that's real estate. We know the markets. We know what it's about. Here in markets where there's sprawl and that it's easier to get around, I see so many more agents building their own future in real estate. And, they have multiple properties. They're flipping. It's just really, really exciting to see that kind of energy and that kind of opportunity in this type of market. So, looking at that retirement plan, if you do actually have one and you're not waiting for the casket to close on, you can actually invest in real estate, whether it's you're buying your own doors, your own places, you're buying duplexes, or you're investing in so many different opportunities in development and multi-units. And it's such a wide open landscape here for investing in real estate compared to some other markets that are more focused in the luxury area. And that was all my upbringing. I was in 3 states, and it was all luxury, all vacation home properties. So it's really interesting to see this type of market here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because that's one of my passions actually, and it's really hard for my own investments, but also working with investors here. The baseline price points are so high that it becomes very risky unless you're able to get in at a really good price to, rely that you're going to be able to get your money out in
That's right.
a profitable manner. And so you're right. Then we have to go off Cape. And that means you've got to have market knowledge. And you don't have the proximity like you're saying you do there. So, and that's one thing I've been looking into actually recently is, there's a lot of opportunity to buy in markets, especially in the Midwest, where the values are low enough that you can confidently get in. And even if you aren't able to add as much value as you'd like, you're still going to get out, with a relatively good profit. But it's an interesting dynamic to try to figure out how to do that.
It is. And I do know of agents around here that are investing in, states away. They're in different states, like you say,
Yeah,
in the Midwest. They do have to have market knowledge and somebody there that has deep market knowledge as well. And the ability to be flexible and getting there and having the right support. And the margin's got to be there when you're buying
right,
at a lot lower dollar. I mean, there are still houses selling some places under $100,000, depending on where that is. And is it
right.
got a cash flow? Is there an upside to it? All that stuff matters. There are opportunities that you can get into for the short dollar compared to like where you are on the Cape.
Yeah. And there are also some really interesting teams that have formed where they're literally just focused on, for instance, short-term rentals. And you approach them when you're looking for an investment, and they will actually, even if they're in another state, and basically they're your go-to. They can figure out the cash flow, they can figure out what enhancements you need to do and take care of everything for you. And that's actually something that I've been considering trying to replicate to some extent on the Cape. Although, so it's much less of a fix and flip. It's really just a pure investment play.
I actually have a client here in North Carolina that's doing just that. Started out with her own investment, started doing short-term rentals on it. And as she started to grow a couple of those, her contacts and her network started to invest as well. And she would take on these luxury properties only. They had to have a certain standard. And now she has her own design company in there, and she's really really pushing a high quality product.
Neat.
I should introduce you to maybe.
Yeah, I'd love to meet her.
It would fit how you work and your standard of quality as well. Or if you're looking to invest with her, she will not steer her people wrong. She's very picky about who she brings in and the people themselves and the properties they have to make sure that they're going to fit the clientele. There's so much competition in the short-term rental business. If you don't
Yeah.
have something that's going to set you apart from the others, you're just one of many.
Yeah, it's interesting here because, I mean, short-term rentals, before they were even called short-term rentals, existed on the Cape for
That's
I
right.
mean, that's been the crux of the economy here for 50 years, you know? And we actually don't have a ton of hotels, unlike a lot of other markets. And over the years, those even larger hotels and motels have been repurposed sometimes into condos or different types of living situations. So here, we have a really short window. It's usually 10 weeks, but those 10 weeks can be highly lucrative for investors. What's interesting, people here have used Stowe, Vermont kind of as an example. We're always trying to find ways to extend that season so that, it's not just those 10 weeks because it's really beautiful here from, May through December. And, what can you do and to entice people? And, culturally, there are a lot of festivals and things that are happening further and further into the fall. And, experiences are also a huge aspect of short-term rentals right now. Where can you add those things? So I'm seeing a lot of that around here. And Stowe, Vermont was one of the places where it was so highly seasonal just for skiing. They made a conscious decision to really stretch that season and focus on summer and fall. And it's been really successful for them. And, there's a lot of conversations around here trying to figure out the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The good and bad about the short-term rentals is a lot of people are doing it because it is a great way to start investing, or it's a great model if you buy right. Yeah, that's the downside too, because a lot of people getting into it where they don't have the resources to do it at the same level as some of these higher end properties can be handled. Renter, there's something for everybody. On the downside is some of them are not. They could put a bad taste in your mouth on the short term rental. So anybody that's looking, go for the high quality for sure. Pay the extra
Absolutely.
money.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. And it's interesting as you with your experience here, so many buyers and sellers, well, I should say buyers who then become sellers, but they're looking a lot of times a typical person is saying, "Hey, I live in an urban area. I want a second home here. Maybe it'll ultimately be my retirement home. I want to enjoy it, 6 to 8 weeks out of the summer, but I love the ability that I could rent it if I wanted to." And that's like the prototypical buyer
That's
in
how
this
it
market.
started, right?
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
rental thing started.
Yeah. And so a lot of times we're not seeing straight investors in this market. We're seeing people who are kind of hybrid where they like the flexibility, the ability to have some incremental income, but it's not, they don't need to have it fully profitable as an investment vehicle.
Sarah, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. I do want to wrap up with one question. You've always been in this luxury, as we discussed. What would you tell your 7 year ago self now that you know what you know?
Good question. You never know it all. It, the, you're, it's, con- I feel like I'm learning every day. And I don't mean that in, like a trite Pollyanna way. It's just literally every day there's something new that's fun and interesting. And I view it as a craft that you get better and better at real estate as you just dive in and try things and, have transactions and work with people and see what happens. And so I would just keep learning and realize that sometimes things can look really like they're falling apart, but there is no rush. Like when you actually have a deal happen and you see how happy the buyer and seller are, it's like the best feeling. And, instead of the negotiating you see on, like $1 million listing and things like that, here it's really just having extreme patience and just chipping away, and even a deal might fall apart for months and then lo and behold, it comes back. So I guess I would just say, you know, have fun, keep learning, and know that it's always going to be interesting at the very least.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Sarah, for coming on. Viewer, please subscribe. Stay tuned. We have phenomenal agents and other guests like Sarah coming on to share their wisdom to make you a better real estate professional. Be your best. Have fun.
Thanks, Joe.